It's finally putting its E. coli issues well in the past. The fast casual chain got news that its payment system may have been the target of a data breach. We talk about these a lot, all too frequently. The company's saying it is currently investigating credit card transactions made in restaurants for 3 weeks in the months of March and April. Joining us now to discuss that is Joseph Steinberg. He's the CEO of SecureMySocial and Inc. magazine contributor. Joseph, it's great to have you join us this morning. I want to talk about this hack specifically as it applies to Chipotle. How common do you see this hack? Basically, going after these companies. How frequently do you see these sorts of things occurring?
Well, as you said, we seem to be discussing these quite often. Payment systems are a great target because money's there. Criminals go where the money is, and payment systems have credit card numbers as associated information, and they want that information. It can be sold, it can be misused, and that's probably what happened in this case.
Joseph, this might seem like a silly question. Are there different types of data breaches in this capacity when it comes to hackers who are targeting credit card and debit cards specifically?
Every breach is different. There are cases where breaches occur in payment systems. Hackers get credit cards relatively quickly, and they misuse them themselves. In most cases today, they're putting in malware that collects credit cards over a long period of time, or as long as they can get away with, and then they're selling those numbers to other criminals, and so the fraud occurs all over the place. There was a criminal who was sentenced to 27 years in prison last Friday for doing precisely that type of crime.
Joseph, how vulnerable are other fast casual chains to these sort of hacks? I mean, we see it now at Chipotle, which obviously is just coming off their whole E. coli outbreak at the end of last year. But when I think of other fast casual chains, I mean, maybe Shake Shack, so many times you just pull out your card, they have to have the same level of vulnerability as a Chipotle.
Well, I can't comment on what any particular chain has, but obviously Chipotle is not nearly the first, and it's probably not nearly the last. There are many issues with payment systems, and hackers are aware of that, and they take advantage of it.
So should we move away from perhaps the traditional method? Everything now is moving more towards a mobile payments, being able to just use your phone, use your watch if you have some sort of smartwatch that does it. And is it not swiping the card? Is that what we need to move away from?
I'm not sure how much that will actually help. There are vulnerabilities in those systems as well, but there are many things that can be done technologically to improve the security around the payment systems, not just the payment systems themselves, but the ability for criminals to reach those systems in order to hack them and install malware. There are other checks that can go on. There are things that can look for anomalous transfers of data. If credit card numbers are being transferred out to servers that have nothing to do with the payment network, for example, that's a problem. There are all sorts of things that can be done, and I'm sure Chipotle is actively pursuing and implementing them at this point. But there are things that other providers can be looking at, and as we get better, criminals get better, and this is a mouse versus mouse game.
Okay, well, Chipotle is certainly not the only company that's dealing with a lot of these headlines right now. Talk to us a bit about HipChat, group messaging service. What are they facing in this space right now, Joseph?
Well, HipChat is a totally different kind of breach. That wasn't a breach attempted to steal credit cards, that was to steal data. And one of the good things at HipChat is that they have apparently protected the passwords there with both hashing and salting, which are two techniques that make it very, very difficult for criminals to actually obtain passwords from stolen data. That does not mean that criminals haven't been able to get valuable data. Knowing who's using what systems and metadata about them can provide valuable information to criminals, but obviously that's nowhere near as valuable as if they could get the logins and passwords, go into the accounts, and then see all the contents.
Joseph,
so there are certain...
No, go, by all means. You finished. Thank you.
So my point was simply that there are different levels of danger. The danger in the HipChat case is not going to be one likely of passwords being compromised, but it is possible that some sensitive information did leak.
Joseph, specifically with cybersecurity across the board, not just with Chipotle, not just with this app, HipChat, I mean, what is it going to take to really move the needle in order to make cybersecurity not a thing, to JD's point earlier, that we're continually talking about?
Well, I think we're going to be talking about this for a long time because people want new technologies, and new technologies come with vulnerabilities. Most of us don't want to wait an extra year for every product to be tested for every possible security problem. We don't want to pay extra for all sorts of security technology. And when we think about that on an individual basis and extend that out to the general population, that creates the problem. You can see at Christmas season, if there's a camera that sells for $30 and another camera that sells for $130 but promises better security, you'll see a lot more purchases of that $30 camera. And that's just the way things are. So we may need some government regulation, we may need industry regulation, we may need some more concern among consumers about the risks.
Joseph, real quick before we lose you, I'd have to imagine you are the pro in this space. Are there little day-to-day things that you do or things that you and your colleagues know to do to ensure that you personally are perhaps more secure as you make these day-to-day purchases that the rest of us maybe aren't even thinking of?
There's nothing that's going to protect you from some of the problems. Some of those problems just aren't protectable by the consumer. But there is one thing when it comes to credit cards that is good advice that does protect from a lot of problems, which is to make sure your credit card is always in sight. In the United States, we have a tendency at restaurants, for example, to hand our card to a waiter or a waitress and have them walk away with it. You can go to the front and pay personally. That keeps your card in sight the whole time, and that prevents all sorts of other problems that happen with credit cards.
Ooh, I haven't heard that one before. Okay, I'm glad I asked that question. Okay, our special thanks to Joseph Steinberg of SecureMySocial and Inc. magazine for joining us. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, well, that's going to do it for our Facebook friends today. But, of course, there's more. So if you want to catch the rest of the show, head on over to sling.com/Cheddar.